This is Brett Weinstein.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Bruce Party.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is Dr. Pierre Corey.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
This is Vance Crowe, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. How's everybody doing today? I guess this will be more of a spoiler alert. I think me and Tom bring her up, but regardless, I'm sitting at Susan Kokinda's, which is, part of the road trip. Very hopeful to meet more and more of the guests that I've come to know through the internet. And so I just finished up a chat with Susan, which will come out next week. And I'm recording this there before I head back, back in Ontario and towards Mel and the kids. Regardless, happy Thursday to everybody out there. When it comes to precious metals, Silver Gold Bull is the one I'm pointing you towards. Whether it's buying, selling, or storing precious metals, they can get you all the help you need. They can answer all your questions. You can text or email Grahame down in the show notes. There's details there. You can text or email him and get any answers to the questions you have. And of course, they're North America wide, folks. They're not just in Canada. It's super easy. You can go to silvergoldbull.ca, sign up for an account, and anything you purchase online gets shipped right to your doorstep. Super easy. And if you got questions, once again, Grahame can help you out with all of that. Guardian Plumbing and Heating, they're back in my hometown. These guys have been keeping homes, farms, and businesses running smoothly since 2010. Whether it's expert service, cutting-edge power solutions, or advice you can trust, Guardian Plumbing and Heating has your back. And you're going to hear all about the blue-collar world when me and Susan, when that episode finally airs, we get into the blue-collar world and some of the things happening down here in the United States. As for Guardian Plumbing and Heating, you can go to guardianplumbing.ca to hear more about Blaine, Joey, get answers to all your questions. Maybe you got some problems, then they can help you. That's Guardian Plumbing and Heating, protecting their customers from the unexpected through innovative solutions. Ignite Distribution, they're a high-service supply company in Wainwright, Alberta, specializing in automotive parts and wide range of additional products, including safety equipment, welding supplies, fasteners, and janitorial items. They operate as a Napa auto parts retailer in Wainwright, Alberta. So if you're going through there, you can reach out to them, 780-842-3433. That's Shane Stafford and his crew. And say hello to them, fine folks. That's where the road trip started, was in Wainwright. When we first departed Lloyd, we went through Wainwright. So, it'll be a little bit until we're back in that country, but life on the road has been a lot of fun. Now, the road trip itself is powered by Zeebs. That's Zane and his dad, Brian. They're based out of Chestermere, Alberta, and they do Zeebs performance restorations. They deliver expert classic car restorations, custom exhaust, and performance upgrades. Those performance upgrades, with the fuel price being as high as it's been, across Canada, I'm reminded, if you're looking to find ways to make your ride a little more fuel efficient, you should reach out to Zane. You can go to Zeebs, zeebs.ca, and inquire about what they can do for your rides. They got some pretty cool ways to make you more fuel efficient. And if you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, Substack, all the things, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to share with a friend if you're enjoying the show. That's how we continue to hit new people, is if you find something like, man, that was a cool interview, share it out with a friend. I was talking to, next week, I'm spoiling a lot of the guests coming on, but Faisal's wife and I were talking, and I was, I didn't realize she did bees. And so I was saying, I got to interview a third-generation beekeeper, and that sparked a whole new conversation. And you just never know which one is gonna be the one to share. So if you're enjoying the show, make sure to share it with a friend. And finally, I guess a couple of the things on Substack. It happened with Carla, the first one. Tom today. There's bonus things being put on there for paid subscribers. So if you're wanting to hear a couple of extra minutes, a few questions in rapid fire, that's there. There's also the Tanner Today Masterclass. He's talking about the life of Paul. That's been airing there. And Substack, the Week in Review, comes out once a week on Sundays, so you can get kind of caught up on everything I'm doing and some things from the road. And if you aren't there, you should go there, because that's where, we're slowly building out the community. You're trying to be a lot more active on Substack. It's been enjoyable to be on there. Now, all that said, let's get on to the tale of the tape. Today's guest is the author of The People's Emergency Plan. I'm talking about Tom Marazzo. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman podcast. I'm joined by Tom Marazzo. If I screw up anything, it's on Shaun. It's not on Tom.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me in your house.
Yeah, no, thanks for reaching out and doing the interview. I think it was, one of the elections, I think a year and a half ago, maybe, that was the last time we talked. It was during one of the elections. And then
On the
we saw-
podcast.
On the podcast.
Yeah,
and
because
then
since then we've been to the Prairie Rising Forum.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
run into each other there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to you on Coffee and a Mic on the way up here this morning. Actually, I'm like, I should see if Tom's been. And then I'm like, oh, he was on Coffee and a Mic. I like Mike Veris, so shout out to Mike if you ever listen to this. I'm like, I didn't realize you and Mike knew each other, so I listened to it. It was before the last election.
Yeah.
And you sounded like every Canadian. Or it's like, yeah, I think the Conservative. I mean, you didn't say things like this, but you're like, I think Conservatives are going to win. But if they lose, Alberta's going to have their independence push and everything. And so, now we sit with Carney and, I don't think by that time, at that current time of that podcast, you were basically like Trudeau's in and we're just kind of waiting it out and we'll see what happens. There was a whole bunch more.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a while since we've chatted, for sure,
Yeah.
especially in a format like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's Carney been in office now well over a year. And, there's a lot of revelations, I think. I think his base is starting to wobble a little bit. I think that Canadians are starting to feel the pinch. But I still think there's far too many Canadians that have Trump derangement syndrome. There's just, in my view, there's too much concern about what the Americans are doing and not enough attention paid to what Canadian politicians are doing. And I think, personally, watching them try to renegotiate the whatever the acronym is this week, NAFTA, USMCA, whatever it's called, it's been a bit of a gong show, which is quite surprising. If you just look at it on face value, it looks kind of like a gong show. But if you look at more the strategic thinking, the bigger picture of what it is that Carney's trying to do, I guess a good source of information right now might be Promethean Action. I don't know if you've ever watched them.
Promethean Action?
Yeah.
I'm going to interview Susan Kokinda after this.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, not right after this,
Yeah.
in a couple days, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly.
But spoiler, folks, Susan
Yeah,
Kokinda is going to be on too.
So I find them interesting. I like them. I listen to them, but I'm always a little bit weary. They do come across a little bit like hardcore Trump sycophants a little bit.
Yeah, that Trump can do no wrong.
Yeah. So, and I think I get that they're supporters. I get that they're trying to clean up some of his messaging, because I will say Trump's messaging has been catastrophically terrible. Again, if you can kind of figure out what, that's not even a word. If you can figure out sort of the strategic bigger moves, then the little stuff kind of makes a little bit of sense. But then when Trump goes in front of a microphone, I'm like, do you even know what the strategic move is? Like, I don't know who's in charge in America right now. I really don't.
Can we? I want to come back to. Okay, so I've been going through every province. Everybody knows this.
Mm-hmm.
Started in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And in Manitoba, probably the theme of the podcast is, why haven't you opened up Churchill? And then, it was with Ken Drysdale, we were talking about Nelson. And then I got a whole bunch of people who know about planning and everything emailing me, sending me different things, talking about that. And I just was like, do Manitobans even care? And so then I move into Ontario. I've been in Ontario, folks. What has it been, like a week now? And we're driving, and as you know, getting across the northern part of Ontario takes a long time, but it's beautiful, especially in the summer.
Yeah.
But the closer I get to Toronto, the thing that has shocked me is it feels like Minnesota. Like, there's so many trees, lakes. It looks, in one word, healthy. Right? Very green, very beautiful, very lush.
Yes.
How on earth has Trudeau, once upon a time, now Carney, sold all these people on carbon capture, and we're destroying the planet and all these things? When you go, I thought it would be 4 hours north. I'm being completely transparent that I was a moron. on like the landscape of what is around Toronto. So I'm married to a girl from Minnesota, right? So I'm asking her about it because she grew up in a big city. I'm like, I just don't get it. It'd be like telling Minnesotans they're destroying the planet when you go 30 seconds outside the city and you just see like big tree. Like, look it off your balcony.
Yeah.
People can't see this, but I'm like, it's just trees everywhere. It's
Yes.
water. Everything's green. Everything's healthy. How have they convinced the largest population by province that we need carbon capture techniques and we're destroying the planet and we got to save the planet and we're going to charge everybody carbon? I don't get it.
Fear. It's just fear, and it's a campaign of fear that's been launched by the environmentalist lobby, who has control or a severe amount of influence inside the education system. Like, this is a multi-generational, I don't want to say propaganda, and I don't want to say, a deliberate fear campaign, but in a sense, it's kind of what it is. And it's brought to you by the education system in the country's largest populated province. And it all starts at school, right? It's where, the schools come out with programs to teach kids about the environment and being environmentally responsible and friendly, which I do think are very good things, very positive things. But yeah, when you look at the math, I mean, even the former, one of the founders of Greenpeace has come out now publicly for the last several years and spoken out against.
Had him on the podcast multiple times.
Yeah, speaking out about the insanity of this campaign, right? And so, again, everything that people believe originates somehow not from their parents, but from the education system within their provinces or territories. And this is the problem, is that we're so detached as parents from what's going on in the education system that it's one more area of government we're not engaged in, unless it has something to do with sex ed. Then parents will get motivated to get in there and maybe make their views known. But we're not questioning environmental science. We're not questioning half of the social sciences that kids are doing. I mean, we're not even questioning in the schools the bloody Indigenous stuff. Like, my daughter, my niece, she's actually my great niece, lives in Niagara Falls, and is telling me that every day in the opening announcements, they do the land acknowledgement. And in the elementary schools in Ontario, they do the land acknowledgement every bloody day. If that is not indoctrination, then I don't know what is. Okay, when I went to school, they read passages from the Bible. You stood up and you did "O Canada." And that's the way it was when I was a very young kid. They got rid of the Bible. Fine, so be it. But, it's a captive audience that the government has control of. And so that's the problem, is the parents are disengaged from what's going on inside the classrooms. So it's a fear campaign.
I know you go the Bible, so be it. I'm like, I don't know. The longer I travel, and this was before I even traveled, I've been really thinking about, I'm just one guy. Like how much change, unless you go into politics and you have this long plan, I'm going to be the prime minister.
Yeah.
And even then you watch Donald Trump or you watch, I don't care, take your pick of all the different political leaders. And like, how much, I don't know. You have a lot of inner fortitude to do that. So I'm not saying that it's not a plan, but I got young kids.
Yep.
I'm sitting here and I'm like, some of the changes that need to happen, I feel like, are generational changes. They're not quick flick the light switch on and we're out of this strange upside down world that sometimes live. Like I've driven across Canada. Absolutely beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful at this point. And I still got the Maritimes and Quebec and, like I can hear twos already yammering on about Quebec and this and that. But like I rode through Quebec 20 years ago. It's beautiful. See all this beauty. See like what the possibilities. I see such potential for Canada. It's insane. But then we're fed such slop and we just all eat it up.
Yeah.
And you go like, well, it's the school system. Okay, well, we just removed the Bible. Not that big a deal. I go, no, that is a big deal in my mind.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it should be forced down people's throats, but on the flip side, if you lose the very foundation of what we have, then you get in this weird world where I'm looking around. I remember Trudeau had the billion tree thing. He's going to plant 1 billion trees. And I'm like, out on the prairies, that actually would have sold because we could use more trees. Although I think we have more trees now than we ever have. But regardless, you drive through the prairies and you're like, 1 billion trees probably wouldn't hurt this place, right? I come out here and I'm like, pardon the French folks, where the fuck did Ontarians think they were going to plant them?
Yeah.
How did Trudeau get that by them? There's nowhere to plant them. Everywhere we went, it's forest.
Yeah.
Like this is I'm like, is it everybody so disconnected in Ontario from politics that they're just like, you could literally say we're gonna give the fish more water and people would eat that up too?
Yes, absolutely true. They really are. I mean, if you look at, the population of Ontario, it's about 15 million. If you took the populations of Alberta and Quebec and BC, it still wouldn't equal the population of Ontario. Like, that's how many people are here. And where do the vast majority of the brand new newcomers to Canada come from? The point of entry is 15 kilometers from here. It's Pearson International. So they all come to Ontario and they spread out from here. But a large number of them stay in Ontario. They're not coming here with liberal values or conservative values. They're coming with values that they brought from their home countries, which is a very, very different thing. It's a very different thing when we're accustomed to. And to go back to your point about the Bible, I do agree with you. But I think that there are generational problems that took generations to create, for sure. And, it's very much like the Freedom Convoy, where a lot of people believed, okay, we're going to have this one major event.
Yeah, I was probably one of them.
Yeah, and we're going to overturn everything with one move. It's like, no, the conditions were set over decades to get us to the point where that could be allowed to take place from the people, from the government of Canada, to do the things that they did to people. I don't think that the politicians would have got away with what they did during COVID 50 years ago. I don't think they would have. Doug Ford wouldn't have got away with it. I don't think, a guy like Trudeau would have gotten away with it, or any of the premiers. I think the people of those provinces would have stood up 50 years ago and said, absolutely not. This is not who we are, and this is not acceptable. We're not going to let you conduct business this way. But they will today, because half the people, the city that I'm in right now, I think right now is 54% immigrants from India. I'm in Brampton, Ontario. 54% of this city. This entire neighborhood, I think there's only about 6 Caucasian families that I've seen. And I've lived here for 4 years. Like, this is not your typical Canadian subdivision that I grew up in. So the values of the people here are very, very diverse. Very diverse. And I don't think they're going to be reading the Bible in any of the schools in this city. I just don't. Like, I can see, if you look in that direction, I can see there's a temple that has a 55-foot tall Hanuman Indian deity that it's been on the news because there's been, massive fights in the parking lots and, Khalistanis going at it with other Indians and having a big brawl out in the parking lot right over there in the temple. It's a kilometer away, right? And it's kind of funny to watch it, but that's the values. We're not importing the values of people that are capable of building a society like we have. They would rather, and I'm not saying this out of a racist thing. I'm just talking about values.
Yeah. You don't have, well, I don't know. Everybody always, whenever we get into immigration, they always have, I'm not a racist. It's like, we can have the conversation without having to worry,
Totally agree.
Folks, we have a problem. It doesn't mean every immigrant is the problem.
Yeah.
It's just the value set on which we're putting Canadians now and the way we're fundamentally changing our country, that is a problem. And we should be able to talk about it. And it should be okay. And it should make us all a little uncomfortable. Because, it's a serious problem that is very complex in one way, because you're talking about people, ethnicities, where they're coming from, what values they're bringing in. And some of it, I just go, is just leadership. Like, we're so poorly, we have such poor leadership. It's one of the things, one of my fondest, I don't know about fondest, I put it very high up there. I just remember being in the room with all the leaders of the Freedom Convoy, and everybody was in chaos, talking over one another. They didn't know what to do. Should we go over here? Should we go over there? How do we do this? How do we do that? And then walks this guy named Tom Marazzo, and you just calm the room down. I watched it happen. I was just like, oh, who the heck's that guy? Don't know who he is. That was pretty cool. And that was the way that you handled the room for the time I was there and the time I got to see it. And, when I look at Canada, what people like about Carney, because I've been riding across Canada now, and lots of people don't know who I am. I would say vast majority of people have no idea who I am. So I just ask some questions, and I'm trying to figure out why people voted for Carney or why they like him. Conservatives who like Carney, right? I don't think that gets talked about enough. There's conservatives out there who like Carney.
Yeah.
And what do they say? He seems like a grown-up. He seems like he knows what he's doing. And I go, what they're saying is, and I could be wrong on my, I'm willing to discuss this with anyone. I think what they're saying is what I've been saying for a long time. I'm just ready for a grown-up to be at the helm that doesn't get flustered, doesn't wear his socks, doesn't go dance here or there, doesn't wear every little thing. And what we got was Mr. Burns. Yes. And, for a lot of people, that's a grown-up. And he has all this accolades of where he was, even though his values don't match everything that I stand for. But in one sense, for a lot of people, he's a grown-up that isn't making a mockery of the country. Now, I mean, we can get into that too.
Yeah. I agree. And I think, I remember when Ronald Reagan was the president of the United States. And I was pretty young. I didn't really have a strong opinion about his presidency. But I lived I grew up in Niagara Falls, so I'm on a border town. I was always getting American television, American news. That's what I was influenced by. And that's what a lot of people growing up on a border town are influenced by. But there was a sort of a persona of what a leader was. I don't want to say tall, dark, and handsome kind of thing, but I mean, Ronald Reagan was the model of what leadership was supposed to look like, from a kid's perspective, maybe. But, when we look across sort of the spectrum of politicians right now, I agree. Like, we got Mark Carney, he's Mr. Burns. We joke about him looking like Mr. Burns, acting like he's even got the posture of Mr. Burns.
Yep.
Right?
He's got some of the quirks of Mr. Burns.
He does. And I think the thing with the hands, like he could be Mr. Burns
If they made a real life Simpsons show,
it'd be him.
He could be sitting there.
He could be it, right? And so I think that
we just need someone to get him to say Smithers. Smithers.
Yeah.
We could somebody to punk him. Burns.
Yeah. Just have somebody punk him and say, yeah, I'm from Smithers. Yeah. So, no, and I agree with you. Like, leadership is not, I've met some phenomenal leaders in the military, like really, really good leaders. And it's not that they were the smartest people, although in a lot of cases, some of them were. Some of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire life came out of the military. And were actually infantry, which there's always a joke about infantry being dumb. They're not. It's a very, very complex job to do. It's very difficult. But some of the best leaders I ever had, and they weren't like Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome, but they had just sort of this charisma about them. And there's always this discussion about, are leaders made or are they born? And I think it's a hybrid of both. And I think if you're born with it, you can become even better. If you're not so great, you can learn how to be pretty good. But I don't see that across the political spectrum. I was very, very hopeful for Pierre Poilievre as an example, but I always knew that he had a physical appearance image problem. And I was kind of happy when they got rid of his glasses and, changed his hair. I think he bulked up a little bit. I don't know. But again, he's just kind of missing something.
Well, I mean, we're talking about Mr. Burns beating a guy who's younger.
Yeah.
I think we can probably agree. I think people. I'm not sitting here. Oh, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but Poilievre's probably more handsome than Mr. Burns. I probably think women think,
I
But
hope.
Once again, he took off the glasses. It looked like he started lifting some weights.
Yeah.
He lost the dorky, sitting behind the desk kind of look. Mm-hmm. And he's got a pretty wife and a family, and like they should walk in and win. But what did Canadians vote for? And now campaign of fear and the propaganda and everything else. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. What they wanted was a mature leader. Mm-hmm. And that's what they thought they were getting in Carney, which tells you something about the psyche of the Canadian voter. Because when I sit and talk to Liberal voters, the longer I sit there, it's not like I'm trying to poke him. Well, maybe I am a little bit, folks. Yeah. It's crazy because I get to just kind of be like that undercover cop, I assume, right? Where you just kind of like asking a couple questions. And what comes out is none of them are really for MAID, climate change. Usually there's one thing in there that they do believe is true, but they don't think men should compete against women in women's sports. No. if they know about BC and the stuff going on there, they don't really think that's great, right? Like, there's a lot of things that they're not for. I'm trying to get to the bottom of why they don't vote Conservative.
Well, again, I think it has a lot to do with having some charisma. And, we've been in a situation for years in this country where, and I think the Americans are like this. I think a lot of the first world politicians, the political class are exhibiting this same exact phenomenon, which is I'm not voting for the best guy or girl. I'm voting for the lesser of the two evils. I don't like either one of them, or I don't like any of them, but I'm going to pick the one that I dislike the least. And I think that, there's also this other problem. Both sides of the political spectrum, they're very tribal. They pick their team, and they're loyal to their team. It's like trying to tell a Montreal Habs fan to
cheer for the Leafs.
To cheer for the Leafs, right?
Or in Alberta for a Flames fan to cheer for the Oilers, or vice versa.
Exactly. Right?
It doesn't go very well.
It doesn't go very well. And we get very tribal, and we don't look at the substance of what the people are saying. We just hate them on spec. That's it. And so I think that's a major problem. Combine that with, we're choosing between Skippy and, Mr. Burns. We're not choosing between Margaret Thatcher and maybe Ronald Reagan. People that were tough, that had grit,
In fairness, the U.S. had Biden for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Some right now would put Donald Trump not anywhere near the category of Thatcher or Reagan. Others would say he is that version.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Democrat Party, I chuckle about this. United States, most powerful country on the planet, was running Kamala Harris. You think, like, as smart as we think the elites are, and how strong they are and convincing, and they can control anything, they couldn't find somebody to run. Like, when Barack Obama comes through, if he's controlled by them, I go, now that was a hell of a pick, because when you listen to that man talk, he was a great orator. Kamala Harris, nobody wanted to vote for her. Democrats didn't want to vote for her. Democrats didn't want to vote for Biden, for Pete's sake. If that's the elites that are so controlling, so overly powerful, that's all they can muster in the political realm that is the United States, you go, we're making this out to be harder than it really is. And yet here we are in Canada, and you go like, we in both sides of the political sphere. Heck, you could add in the NDP, you could add in Jagmeet Singh, you could add in the Green Party, Elizabeth May, and you go, that's the best you guys got? Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, in The Dark Knight, what did Joker say? Gotham deserves a better class of criminal. And I would say Canada deserves a better class of political or politician.
I ran in 2022, a couple of months after the convoy was over. I got 1,973 votes, which was roughly...
And who did you run for?
I ran for the Ontario Party. Derek Sloan is the leader of the party. And, hugely unsuccessful in terms of, I didn't come anywhere close to beating the guy named Dave Smith. And I ran in Peterborough, Ontario.
And Dave Smith was with what party?
He's with one of Doug Ford's
Conservatives.
Conservative Party, yeah. Loosely conservative. I don't know what you classify.
Just that
in that range.
Just that what I've learned in politics, it doesn't matter what province you go to, doesn't matter, we're talking federal, provincial. The only time that it gets away from team politics is when you go down to municipal and things like that. And then there's even different ways that people can twist and turn things. But regardless, on the highest levels, it's the Montreal-Toronto thing.
Yeah.
And that goes across all provinces. So when you create a new party, Derek Sloan's new party, and you think you're going to just walk in and have all the success, the easiest things for them to say is vote splitting, and everybody gets fear, and they walk in and they vote for what they've always known, and even if they don't like it.
Yeah.
That's just the simplest thing to do. So it doesn't shock me. How many percent of the vote was 1,000? Do you remember?
It was just over 2%. What I ended up getting. But here's the irony. this is the irony of what happened in that particular election, though. I got a fly bugging me now.
Well, welcome to being outside, Tom,
yeah,
and doing
exactly.
an interview with
Outside.
with construction sounds in the back and
exactly.
everything else.
Exactly. So here's the irony, right? So we had Kathleen Wynne was the premier with the Liberals. I think they dominated Ontario for about 15 years. Then she got kicked out of office. Doug Ford took over, became the premier. COVID hits. And, Doug Ford, say what you want about him. I thought he was doing great with the pandemic in the beginning, in the early days when we really didn't have a lot of information about what was really going on. He wasn't doing a bad job. I thought he was doing, my opinion has changed because now I know a lot more about what actually happened. But we get to the 2022 election. So we're going through 2 years of COVID, lockdowns, all sorts of hypocrisy, all sorts of major blunders, mandates, the whole bit. Just a lot of unnecessary harm done to this province for no gain whatsoever. And you got a guy like Doug Ford. The people of Ontario were so terrified of the 7, because when Doug Ford got elected the first time, there was only 7 remaining Liberals left. After 15 years of Liberal domination, there was 7 Liberals left. They actually didn't even qualify to have official party status. And I think they requested it from Doug Ford, and he said no. So we get to the 2022 election, and people are so terrified of the Ontario Liberals that they literally, not only did they give Doug Ford a second majority government, but they gave him 20 more seats after what he had done to everybody in this province during COVID. This is the psyche. This is the thinking. People were terrified of the Liberals, so terrified they would not even consider the Ontario Party or that other party that ran in Ontario that had the same numbers as we did. And so they were so terrified of the new blue in the Ontario Party that they wouldn't even consider voting one of us in. In fact, the 5 Doug Ford MPPs, I think he kicked out 7 during his time in just before that election, and he had 4 independents that were running, and the constituents did not re-elect the 4 independents that were running because they all got kicked out of Doug's party, and they were all over the vaccine mandates. Did not get re-elected by their constituents, and one of them I can think of was 13 years as an MPP, had been successfully re-elected many times. But his constituents didn't reward him based on his courage and his convictions. They just moved on, said, no, Doug Ford doesn't want you, so we're going to vote for Dougie's pick. And so it was Rick Nichols out in Western Ontario. Didn't re-elect Rick. They elected Doug Ford's new pick.
So when you sit and think about that for a while,
Yeah.
right? Because I assume you have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where do you get to? Because, if you want to see change, but then everything you just said, you sit and stew on that for a bit, where do you get to?
I had a great interview with Bryce Waite yesterday. We were talking about a bunch of these type of subjects. And that's such a huge question. It doesn't have an immediate answer. And like I said earlier, everything that was done to us, and I refer to it now as the COVID example, not the COVID experience, the COVID example, because there have been many, many examples in the last 20 to 30 years of things that were done to the public, the lies that were done to the public, that COVID was just one more example. And I think that the conditions have been set to do things to the public over and over and over and over, but the public doesn't seem to be learning. They're just trying to go along to get along because they have mortgages and car payments and they want to have a boat and they want to do stuff. And so the public in this country are so apathetic and uninterested, and they feel so small and so isolated that they don't feel like they can make any sort of a difference. And they're certainly not going to join somebody else who is not part of the Habs or the Maple Leafs to get on this bandwagon and try to improve things, because we see over and over and over various elections, people running as candidates and saying, look at the PPC as an example. And I'm not here to be a shill for any specific party.
Yeah, but we can
PPC,
talk about the PPC.
Yeah, we can talk about them. But what really, really disheartened me is, and I did one meme in my entire life, and it was a picture of the federal conservatives and the PPC, two tables, you know. The sign over the PPC said, I want to give you everything you're asking for. And I think the CPC was like, we're just not liberals. We're not Mark Carney, or we're not Justin Trudeau. That's all we are. That's all we have to offer you. We're just not that guy. But the PPC was not made up of career politicians who wanted to keep the matrix going, keep the same system of government going. It was made up of people from all walks of life, from your communities, that actually wanted to change things. What, 4 elections now? Not one of them have even come close to getting elected. Not even close. So it tells me it's not about the people who run for office that want to lead the change that in the direction of this country should go. It's the voters that don't want to support the people who want to give them the very change that they're asking for.
Or it's even, I don't mean to say simpler than that, but you think of like, okay, Canadian culture is built around, I don't care, you can have as many immigrants right now in the country, it's still built around hockey.
Yeah.
Hockey's always such a great example. Mm-hmm. So the Edmonton Oilers, or if it was the Toronto Maple Leafs, sorry, Maple Leafs fans, it has not been the Toronto Maple Leafs. If it's been the Montreal Canadiens, the Edmonton Oilers, the Vancouver Canucks, the Calgary Flames, Ottawa Senators have come close. Mm-hmm. Whenever they make a prolonged run, the bandwagon effect does happen. Mm-hmm. So I see lots of similarities between politics and hockey. Mm-hmm. And at times I think it's a bit dirtier of a game, but then I watch stuff go on in the NHL and I go, probably not. Probably just I'm staring at it quite I'm dedicated at looking at it most days, right? So if you were to create a place that had a bandwagon effect, you would have to get some wins. I think of like the Reform Party back in the day.
Yeah.
The first election they went through, I think, what was it? Was it 2 they got elected? I want to say it was like 2. And then, by the next election, it was a landslide of people going there, and to the point where they thought they could take over the entire country. Is there other problems to that theory? Well, probably. There's probably other things going on. But, I think of the PPC. Mm-hmm. They've become the perennial loser. So what happens in people's mindsets, mm-hmm. rightfully or wrongfully, once again, now I got to defend myself. I'm not saying the PPC is it's just you look at the thing. They can never win. And all of a sudden that takes hold. So then nobody's voting for them, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that a strange? So we're a fickle little creature here.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and I agree, you've got to stack up some wins. You got to have them, right? You got to get on the board. And look at the Green Party, though. It took them over 30 years to get one win, to get Elizabeth May eventually elected, right? But even there, though, she hasn't really done anything with the party, right? It took that long to get the win. They got the win. They couldn't capitalize on it. Now we're sportscasters, right? But I agree with you that if you don't stack up wins, you don't get the positive attention that you need to build on that, okay? Now, when we go back to values, though, we're not voting for values. We're just voting for our tribe, the winning team. We're picking the winning team, because how many times have you heard, oh, you're vote splitting and they can't win. So if I vote for you, I might as well vote for Liberal, and I'm throwing my vote away.
Yeah. And as soon as you have to explain it,
yes,
then you've already lost them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you haven't done the work for the 10 minutes, or maybe it's 30 seconds to understand vote splitting and how most upstart parties run, you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't take you that long, but if you have to explain it and the first thing out of your head is it's vote splitting, chances are you're not winning that person over.
No. And I'll tell you something that's I researched this. In the history of this country, there's been one Liberal Party, one federal Liberal Party of Canada. One. There have been 5 iterations of the Conservative Party. And if you add on a 6th, which is the PPC, and I know that for the next election, there will be more federal conservative leaning parties, it kind of proves the point that Conservatives have a really, really difficult time working together. Look at Alberta independence as a great example right now. How many groups are out there? How many independent groups are out there with Alberta independence or separation or Canada 51 or whatever you call it? They can't work together. They cannot work together. And this is a phenomenon amongst Conservatives. Liberals we call it the hive mind with the Liberals, but it's very effective. It really is effective. They somehow get in and they can maintain control, and they do it. They're very organized. They're very collective, and they can work as a team. Conservatives, no, you've offended me. So now my priority is the offense that you've committed against me, and I can't work with you. So I'm taking my ball. I'm going to go home. But to continue with hockey, we're going to stay. I'm taking my puck and my stick, and I'm going home. This is the sort of MO of conservative types of voters. Look at the independence groups. They're not even getting along. They all want the same bloody thing, but they're not getting along, and they're going after each other. They're crabbing. They're ripping each other apart publicly on social media. I find it ridiculous. It's like you want the same objective. It's like, to use a military analogy, it's like, okay, the infantry wants one objective. The armor guys want to do something different. The engineers don't really know what to do, but they're going to follow both. And the artillery is like, whoever calls me first. Right? Like, it's so divided. There's no unified statement amongst these people to follow, other than we're just unhappy with Ottawa. That's the only thing they seem to agree on.
So in my interview I listened to you with Mike Ferris, you pointed out something that I've been thinking about for some time, and you were looking at the Freedom Convoy in hindsight. And what you said in that interview was, if I could go back and do it again, I'd write out something that said that these are the demands. This is the timeline. And if you just meet with us and do these things, we're out of here. Yeah. And then you made a joke. It's not a manifesto because everybody gets wound up about that. Yeah. It's just like, it's a clear direction.
Yes.
And for so many people who are against the government or upset with the government or wanting independence for the Alberta conversation, the plan isn't thought out 10 years. It's thought out 3 days. Mm-hmm. And the conversation I had with retired Colonel David Redman really brought this home for me. Because as I talked to him, he just kept saying, there's no plan, there's no plan, there's no plan. Here's the pillars, there's no plan, here's the pillars. And I said, wait a second. You're saying if all of a sudden they addressed all these, you might be a separatist. You might actually be for independence. And he wouldn't say yes, but he wouldn't say no. I'm like, oh, they just need a plan. Well, isn't that what we all want? Is somebody who has a clear direction of this is where we're going to go. And what is that? That's a leader who has a vision of where you, and what are we lacking in society? A little bit of that. Yeah. And conservatives, are funny because, like, in Alberta, some of them love Daniel Smith to a fault. I might think it's the Donald Trump thing. Some of them hate Daniel Smith to a fault. It's the same thing. But she's such a talented leader that still, even then, they follow. Right? And what do we want? We want somebody, and don't get me wrong, when I listen to the problems of Canada, and I think, holy crap, you're right on the Liberal side of things, and how many times, the iterations of the Conservative government, if there's anything to motivate Albertans to really push for independence, you've got a shot. And you, as much disagreement and people left, right, fighting, where are we going, everything else, you have a shot on a referendum that actually isn't a referendum and gives you time to create the plan that would give the vision of where you want to go. And I know there's people working on that. And not everybody gets that opportunity.
Yeah. And I've said this many times. There's been groups that have reached out to me that, the various organizations that have formed since the Convoy. And the first thing out of my mouth is always, okay, do you have a mission statement? Do you have a code of conduct? And do you have an end date? Like, in the end date is, what is your measure of success? So that if you get what you want, are you going to terminate the group? Or are you going to, which I see all the time with these groups, are you just going to wander in the dark? You have no mission statement, no idea what is the measure of success to terminate the group. Because if you get what you want, then you don't need the group anymore. So why are you addicted to the fight?
Well, that's Greenpeace in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. And so now, you know, I hope people know, like, I'm very close personal friends with Keith Wilson. You know, I lived with Keith for 7.5 weeks at the Public Order Emergency Commission. I was with Keith almost every day at the Convoy. And of all the groups out there that I'm aware of in Alberta right now, if I lived in Alberta, the one I would be fully behind in supporting and maximizing my effort would be Keith Wilson's group.
Him and Tanya Clemens.
Tanya, exactly. Yep. So because they've got the right idea, they've released a white paper. A lot of anonymous analysis have gone into it, and they welcome the people who are doing the analysis on what they're proposing, the plan that they're creating. They basically wrote a white paper, and they're opening it up for review. And they're saying, we'd love it if you put your name on it, but if you want to do it anonymously, please feel free, go ahead. But Keith has the right idea. And he's put together a very small team. He's not expanding it. This is the problem with a lot of the grassroots movements. They get energized about an idea, about a fight, and they think the first thing they should do is get members, grow the group, get the momentum. It's the last thing that you should do. The first thing you should have is, what is my mission? What am I doing this for? The second thing is, if we get what we want, what is the measure of success so we can shut this whole thing down? Then the third thing is, before you take on members, is I need a code of conduct. And you know why the code of conduct is so important? And I got this from Veterans for Freedom and other things that I've done in the military. But the code of conduct actually protects the entire integrity of the organization. Because what you'll have is people will go in you know, freewheel, do an interview or do a podcast, or like basically go on their social media and say stuff that looks like they're speaking on behalf of the group, when really they're not. They're just out there freelancing and saying whatever they want, but they don't recognize that what they just said reflects on this organization that they belong to. And so when you do a code of conduct, you create an agreement. It's like saying, Shaun, do you remember when you joined my organization and we gave you the code of conduct and it said that this was the message, this is what we were about? Yeah, great. Well, you just did that big podcast or that whole thing, and you went in a completely different organization, and do you realize that people think now that's the way the organization is going? But you agreed to that. So what are we going to do about it? Are you going to stay with the group, or are you going to leave the group and post on your social media a retraction or whatever? Or do we have to kind of remove you from the group? Because what you just did and what you said was you, but you didn't make that clear to everybody else. You're making it look like it's from my group. So we have a code of conduct that you agreed to, and now we have a decision to make. It's easier to have that conversation than it is to say, hey, you know what you did was not cool. And your response was, well, nobody told me I could or couldn't do that. Do you know what I mean? So,
but this is why at times I feel a bit like I'm a bit of a lone wolf.
Yes.
But the reason that I prefer that, the reason I named it the Shaun Newman Podcast, so I could go wherever I wanted.
Yeah.
I could say whatever I want to say.
Yep.
I've never been embarrassed, you know, like I've released, if I'm going to have the conversation, I'm going to release it. There's a couple ones that I was just like, man,
yeah,
I don't know if I want to release that. But one of the things I pride myself in is if I record it, you get to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't want to be Vesper. If you ever listen to this, Vesper was bringing up on a mashup a couple weeks ago about, you know, why we all don't get together, all the independent medias. And this has been an idea that has been floated since probably 2022. And I've been in several meetings about it. But independent media, there's a reason you're independent. And it kind of goes to conservatives. We don't work well together. I don't want to be told how to do my podcast as much as you don't want to be told how to do your social media or what have you. And there's a blessing and a curse to that. And so I've tried really framing where I sit as we can be a group of independent islands, an archipelago. Archipelagos keep the storms out. They shield the main island from rough things. Everybody loves to visit the different islands and see how this is interesting. And we are in a chain, and we all probably think similarly. Not that islands think, but we get to go out and have we can go out and say whatever we want to say, and then I don't have to come back and report to Tom about me going off on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Don't know if you're a Toronto fan, but regardless, and that can be just fine. Because when we want this like big safety in numbers, the safety in numbers is that there is so many Canadians, including Liberals, that think like us. We just have to be willing to talk to one another.
Yes.
And when you get in a big group, you get in this hive mentality of like, everything the Liberals do is bad. Everything the Conservatives do is right. Everything, or the PPC, or take your pick of where you sit. And we all have to think like that. And if we don't, well, then you're out. Or you representing us poorly. It's like, no, like we're all trying to make our way in this strange world where the hive mentality seems to be winning right now. But like, we all wanted to be independent for a reason. But that doesn't mean we don't have to, we can't support one another and work together to make absolute or bigger changes in the Canadian psyche.
And I think being independent is vital. I mean, it really does come down to what the Americans recognized, the concept of free speech. I mean, free speech is more than just, an amendment to their constitution because somebody thought it was a great idea. They understood that the very essence of freedom comes from your free speech. It doesn't mean that you're absolved from consequence to what you say.
Correct.
It just means that you've got the right to say it, but you've also got the right to the consequence to it. But at the end of the day, if you censor people, you don't have freedom. That is as fundamental to freedom as you can possibly get, is the words that somebody uses, their thoughts and their ideas. But what is never really talked about on the other side of that is, because we talk about the freedom to say what you want, maybe some consequence, but we never talk about, and I think Eva Chipiuk is great at talking about this, is division or dialogue over division, right? We default to the division piece. We should be defaulting to the dialogue to be able to hear and process other people's ideas. Nobody says you have to agree, but we should be saying, if we're going to live in a society and be respectful to one another, we should at least be willing to listen. I remember the first day of kindergarten, my first homework
assignment. You
assignment.
remember your first day of kindergarten?
I do. And I remember, and that was a long, long time ago. What was that? 47 years ago. I still remember my kindergarten teacher. But the teacher said, one person talks, the rest of you listen. Then you take your turn. But it was always about the listening. We don't, as a society, do a great job of listening to other people's point of view. After the convoy and I ran in Peterborough, I put it on social media. I was willing to do a thing. I was going to rent space and say, prove me wrong, Peterborough. And wow, did I get attacked by the anti-convoy people in the town of Peterborough. They didn't have an argument at all. It was just pure, I hate you. And that's it. End of story. I just hate you. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't care what you have to say. I just hate you. I am not willing to hear your voice. I'm not going to show up to an event that you're hosting to talk about important issues.
That's been a hard thing on the podcast, actually. A bunch of people that have voted Liberal, they said, why don't you bring on the other side to your stories?
Juicy.
And I'm like, sorry, he had a fly go over his head.
Yeah.
A big one. And I said, I've tried. I tried in the middle of COVID, actually. I even tried, like Charles Adler's the one that comes to mind right off the hop because now he's in the Senate. Maybe I could try harder, true, but I've tried to have on several different people who I think would have a very opposite insight to what I see going on. And it would be uncomfortable for me, but I tried. Ryan Jesperson, before I left, I wanted him to be one of the first interviews on the, it's like, well, how hard did you try, Shaun? It's like, well, I don't know. I sent him emails and off to his team and everything. Nobody ever got back to me. Nobody ever sent, we're kind of interested. And that has become a long list of the same tendency from people who disagree with my train of thought, is they're not going to engage in the conversations. And that's tough because then all you hear is one side of the conversation. Well, they're the same thing. On their side, it's the same. Like, what's the problem we have with them? We look at them and they go, man, that's who they're getting to talk on that issue? Why aren't they getting like one of these handful of people who are so articulate and know it so well, and they could actually do good in a discussion or a debate or whatever? And you see it play out. The discussion isn't happening. And it seems like it's very difficult to have happen. I mean, that's your entire story with Prove Me Wrong Peterborough.
Well, around that time, I went on Dean Blundell's show twice. And the first time, I think the interview was about 4 hours. And actually, how I got in contact with him, he went after me publicly on Twitter or X or whatever it is. And so I responded, and I wasn't really interested in the back and forth fighting. It's kind of unnecessary. But I went on his show for about 4 hours. I thought it was a good show, but the only reason I said I would go on the show, because he disagrees with everything that I believe and vice versa. But the reason was I said, look, Dean, we have an opportunity to show a little bit of leadership. I'm not here to attack you, and I'm not coming on your show to be attacked, but I'm here to have a conversation. If you and I can't use this opportunity to say we're two exactly opposite people, but we're willing to talk and not to fight about it, but to hear each other's views, then I'll come on the show. And I think that's what we did. And in fact, I was reading the comments while I was on the show, and man, I was getting abused by his audience like crazy. But I did get some apologies at the end that were sent to me later. And the second time, unfortunately, I went on his show, it was an ambush. He brought on Karima Syed or whatever her name is. And I'm not a fan of hers, no matter what, she's done a 180 on her views allegedly over the last year or two. But she came on. It was just a total ambush the second time around. And that was pretty frustrating for me because I went on there in good faith and it was just an ambush. Right. But hey, he's gone now. So whatever, like, I don't even think he has a show. I think he's being sued by everybody, but it was an opportunity to have an actual real conversation between two people that didn't agree on anything. But,
I always, it's funny, those conversations, if you can try and take your emotion out of it, which is really tough.
Yeah.
Are always so enlightening because you're like, I don't know how you got there, but tell me more. Once again, people not knowing on the road who I am, I've got to hear some really interesting things where you're just like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I try not to say too quickly that I'm from Alberta because as soon as I do that, it's almost like saying you're conservative, right? Like they know.
Yeah.
So they can feel it in my, like they're like, oh, Alberta, eh? Like, it's interesting. It took me until, no word of a lie, Sudbury to finally find somebody say, Alberta, we're with you.
Nice.
I was like, I thought that would have happened in Northwestern Ontario, like way faster. Sorry, Carla, if you're listening. Like, obviously, there's people that I know, but I'm talking about people that have no idea who I am, and they hear or see your license plate in Alberta, and almost every person up till Sudbury was like, oh, yeah, Alberta. You could just tell in their reaction to it that they're strongly opposed to Alberta and independence.
Well, you know what? Last September, I went to that rally in Christie Pitts. And a guy named Joe had organized it. There was a rally all over the world that same weekend last September. And it was about, re-immigration, that kind of thing. And I got invited to speak. I prepared something. I think I was 2 kilometers away in my car, still hadn't even parked. And I just got this sense, like, no, I'm not speaking today. There's something I can just feel. There's something today. Everybody else who had the same rally that same day across the world, they had phenomenally successful things. I think Tommy Robinson had a big, huge, successful crowd in the UK. I think Australia had one, or New Zealand. Very successful. Toronto, we were probably outnumbered 50-1 by Antifa. And it was highly volatile. There were a couple of arrests. And as I was walking to where we were all meeting to kick this thing off, I could hear the crowd. There was a counter protest there. And I didn't know exactly. I'd never been to that park. So I was walking there, and these two guys, young guys, come up and they hand me this flyer. And I'm looking at the flyer. I'm going, oh, okay. Yeah, these are the same people. I'm reading the points that they wanted on the flyer. I'm like, oh, these must be the people I'm meeting. Turns out they were the counter protesters. And that was the irony of it. They refused to hear anything that we had to say, or people on my side of the argument had to say. But if you looked at their literature, it was, I would say, 80% in common what we wanted. We both wanted the same conversation, both the same objectives, but nobody would talk to each other. And it was very dangerous, very volatile. The police were obviously there protecting the little tiny group that we were. But man, you should have heard some of the filthy things that people called us, and which makes me always laugh when people say, thank you for your service. Because it's like, yeah, you would still, if I was standing here in a uniform, you probably would have still spoken to me that exact same way, so anyway, I know that's a little bit of a tangent thought.
No, but
yeah.
I mean, once again, it's the emotion.
Yeah.
Right? The emotion does odd things to people.
Mm-hmm.
I ever tell you about having you remember the 1 million march for the children?
Yeah, I did that one too in Niagara Falls.
We had one in Lloyd,
Mm-hmm.
and for Lloyd, I think what was the numbers? 600 or 700 people showed up, and for Lloyd, like I'm just gonna throw it out there and say it's probably the largest protest Lloyd's ever had.
Yeah.
And I think there was 11 people showed up to counter protest.
Mm.
By the end, there was 4 left.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them left because some of the things that were getting said were pretty vulgar and just almost downright embarrassing for in a small community to have go on. Mm-hmm. But at the end of it all, we're having lunch, right? I can't remember if we'd had sandwiches or something. Anyways, we invited the counter protesters to stay. And so everybody was sitting around, a guys singing. Right? It's almost like all the emotion had been taken out of the day.
Yeah.
Protest is done. Nobody's on the stage. There's a guy singing on the stage. And he's doing a couple cover songs. He's just sitting there strumming, and everybody's just sitting in their little groups. And I'm looking around. I'm like, this is what civilization was supposed to be. Even the counter protesters sitting there eating. Right? And every once in a while, it's almost like they had Tourette's. They yell at the singer like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just sit there and enjoy the song? He's not singing about kids. I think he's singing like, Neil Young, for Pete's sake. Like, what are you upset about? But it's almost like they had a jerk of like, you suck. Yeah. And you're like, what is going on right now? But I saw, like after the protest, in the middle of the protest, so much emotion. Mm-hmm. I had to redirect people all the time. Just don't interact with it. Just turn around. They're just looking to try and get you to really, I don't know, to punch them or get in a wrestling match, just to even have the verbal confrontation. When it's like, we're just here to show our solidarity of like protecting children. That's what we're here for. We don't have to get all emotional about it. And yet that's what was ramped up so much. The emotion was ramped up to an insane level that day. But when it's all done, they sat and ate with us right in the middle of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And, my experience when I did the march too was actually in St. Catharines, Ontario. There was a small group of counter protesters. They were pretty ineffective. But, there's counter protesters are all over the place for everything. I mean, there was, believe it or not, a small group of veteran counter protesters that showed up in Ottawa to protest against James Topp. And I heard about them, and I had, I think, their email. I invited them for a meeting to discuss it beforehand to find out what are you upset about? What are you upset about with James Topp? And we jokingly refer to them as the Bolsheviks. And they were, the guy organizing it was a reserve cook, right? Like not a heavy hitter in the military. But in my view, I think a lot of these people are paid to show up. I don't think they're ideologically motivated in any way. I think somebody's paying them to be a counter protester. Who that is, I have no idea. But when I went to the Christie Pitts thing, I was looking around and I'm like, I'm looking at you and I'm calling BS, and the fact that you don't even believe what you're screaming at me right now. Somebody paid
Can
you
you
to
imagine
show up.
having that job?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Anyway, they're all just background extras as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think of Alberta independence? We've been all over the map. We've bounced around 12 different things.
Yeah.
Alberta independence. It's probably certainly where I'm from, the hottest conversation going. You know, October's not that far away. Most people I've ran into in Ontario, once again, not people I know, just most people, think Alberta divorce is not always the answer. It's kind of the mantra I get. What are your thoughts on what's happening there?
So, somebody who, I'm not from Alberta, so I don't at the moment have a dog in the fight. If Alberta does separate in the future, I will absolutely have a dog in the fight, because there's going to be a domino effect to this if it actually does happen. But at this stage of the game, what is more important to me, what is more vital, what is more Canadian to me, is not really what the outcome of independence is. It's the fact that the politicians have enough respect for the voters to even ask them the question. This is the issue. And I like Danielle Smith. I've always liked her. She is by far like miles above in terms of she's the one of the most effective communicators I've ever seen. She's
I would agree.
Very talented in that area. A lot of times I disagree. I don't know who's advising her. I'm a little frustrated by who advises her on certain things, but I'm also not a political operative. So she's getting advice from many, many different directions, and she's in the seat. She has to make the decisions. So she has to do what she thinks is best based on so many people giving her different advice. And who gives a crap what Tom Marazzo thinks in terms of telling Danielle Smith? Like, she's not going to call me up and say, hey, Tom, what do you think? She doesn't even know who the hell I am. Nor should she. She's running her own province. I'm irrelevant in her life. However, if I did have a coffee with her, I would ask her, don't make Alberta independence about what you want. You're one vote. You get to vote in a referendum in October as well, Premier Smith. Your job is to set the conditions so that your constituents have a government that listens to them, asks them a question, and then follows through with the decision that the constituents make. That's your job. You're there to represent what your people want, not to tell them, listen, I'm a federalist. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you guys all vote the way I want you to vote. I mean, the SEC in America, or even Bay Street, would probably call that market manipulation. I think that her primary responsibility is to give the public an opportunity to make the decision for themselves. That's where her focus should be. She gets to vote however she wants. Okay, but she shouldn't be using her influence, I would say, as the person saying, hey, I'll give you the chance to do it. But I also kind of see where she's playing politics with this referendum too, because now she's saying, I'm going to give you a referendum to give you a referendum. So I disagree with that piece. It's like, be strong, be bold, be brave, show courage, because conservatives like courage. They really like boldness, and they like people who listen to them. So my message for her is, if she ever calls me, is stop the messaging about trying to convince people to do what you want. Focus your message on saying to them, I'm your representative, and you have asked me to hold a referendum and to ask a very specific question. That is what my focus is going to be as the leader. I'm giving you what you want because that's my job. So this is the issue for me. What the outcome is, I don't have a dog in that fight, so who cares what I think? What I think is, are you bold enough and respectful enough of your constituents to ask them what they want and then to follow through on it? That's, for me, is the whole ball game. That's what I would focus on right now. Now, a guy like Keith Wilson is making the case for why the divorce from Ottawa is appropriate. And if I look at all the factors, I think it's appropriate. Don't stay in that abusive relationship a moment longer than you had to. It's not like you didn't have a chance. You had the Reform Party. You've sent MPs to Ottawa. You've done all these
We
things.
had Stephen Harper.
You had Stephen Harper, right? You've done all these things. And as far as I'm concerned, you had every chance in the book. If you look at just the resources alone, I cannot make a good financial logical argument as to why Alberta would remain as part of Canada. And nostalgia is not a reason any more than hope is a course of action.
This is why I say Canada, like when you drive across it, you're like, man, the potential here is astounding.
Mm-hmm.
But that would take a leader to stop worrying about saving the planet and saving everyone's population and immigrating in everyone. And we've got our own issues in-house with First Nations or Indians or wherever, Aboriginal people, whatever you want to call them. We've got our own little things going on there. But I go like, man, if you ever got somebody who could just speak to the people and go like, listen, we could. You want to actually put up a fight against the United States? Is that what we actually want to do? We want to get our elbows real high up?
Yeah.
Okay, that's going to take 20 years, and we're going to have to go this direction, and we're going to have to become a superpower, an actual one, with energy, primarily. But, like, we got all the other resources, too, and we're going to have to start doing things like that. But if we create an adversary of ourselves, the United States is going to treat us as such. And then we're going to be in a whole different type of ball game. But if that's where you want to go, all right, let's start working that way. Let's start becoming independent, not this act like we're independent. And I don't know. I wonder if the Canadian population is ready for that, if we've always been ready for that, or if there's anyone willing to step in there and actually go through the gauntlet, and if the gauntlet of bureaucracy would allow that.
I think that is the number one problem is the gauntlet of bureaucracy. And it is the Matrix. I'm not using this as an analogy. This is like truth. Like, you know the scene in the Matrix, the original, where the woman walks by in the red dress, right? And he says, none are more helplessly enslaved than the people inside the Matrix that will do everything in their power to defend it, basically. And so I'm seeing that sort of attitude amongst the bureaucrats and the MPs and the political class. The system of government we have, its first prime directive is to protect itself. It's bigger than Pierre Poilievre or Mr. Burns. It is there to protect itself. Its very survival is the system of government we have. Everybody else comes and goes. And the bureaucrats, they're the ones who hold the real power in government. They're there 20, 30, 40 years. The politicians come and go. They're not the ones really making the shots or calling the shots. Why are we putting, who's the Minister of Defense right now? I don't even know who the minister, but the last one we had, Anand, she came from the media. She didn't even so much as do basic training in the military, but we're going to put her in charge of the national defense.
But once again, I'm like, if Shaun was prime minister for one day, or, whatever the time frame is, I would put competent people in their positions.
Yeah.
And chances are they're going to tell me things that I don't like, and I'm going to have to be okay with that, and they're going to do things, but they're competent, so that's what you trust. And what we had under Trudeau for sure was DEI hires, right?
Yes.
Like they all fit, they all look like this, like we're so, and now we're reaping the consequences of that. So like you go like, if I'm a wolf, a predator, and I'm looking at this hen house and the door is wide open, why wouldn't we just come in? Heck, they're even saying, you want to come in? We got chickens. So in they come. And we put in somebody in that position. But I mean, you look at the gun laws and everything going on with Anana Sanagria, saying that wrong. But regardless, and you go like, that's the best we got. That isn't the best we got. Yeah. I know that's not the best we got. Yeah. We have a lot of great people. I go back to my conversations in Manitoba about opening up the port. It only took, folks? 6, 7 conversations. Now, is this the answer? I'm not saying it is, but I think it's a pretty good start to realize Churchill probably isn't your port. Nelson probably is. It's going to be a little bit of a hurdle to get there, but with our technology and everything going on, not that big of a hurdle, and you could open up Nelson. And then the question Manitobans had was, well, would anybody use it? And I go, well, talk to your neighbors, because I'm pretty sure Alberta and Saskatchewan would, because they're being railroaded by BC right now, and it's not that hard to get that type of conversation figured out. But I also know in my conversations with politicians, the bureaucracy and how long things take. Well, we're seeing that in Canada right now.
Yeah.
And we have supposedly people who are put in place, Alberta, red tape reduction minister, right, to get the government out of its way, right? And yet, bureaucracy has built itself a fortified castle to make sure that we can never dismantle it completely. And so that it's there to protect what the institutions are there for. And they have vastly different ideas than what I think a lot of the people want.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been for months, and I've written about 3 articles on my Substack trying to piece all this geopolitical stuff together. And I've written about where Alberta actually fits into it. And this is all I've taken conversations and pieces and things I've read and stuff, and I'm looking at this sort of thesis about what is going on, why did Trump go to Iran, and how it all plays out. Nate from Canadian Prepper, he covers that whole conflict very, very seriously, that as well as Russia, Ukraine. And there's a theory out there, and I think it's a really good one. I think it makes a lot of sense, because the Americans have 750 bases around the world. Around the world, right? And how many aircraft carrier battle groups, right? So these are floating bases. And you've got Air Force bases that have to supply and do all these things. So the infrastructure for the U.S. Military, I think their budget's over $1 trillion a year. Okay, very, very difficult to maintain that and to keep up an operational readiness or tempo that's that extreme, right? And I think that the theory, and I'll get to why it impacts Alberta so strong in a second, but I think America wants this Fortress North America concept. And so instead of being a global superpower, where they have to be extended out all over the planet to project their power, they have all these bases. It would be better for them to become a regional superpower. The problem, they can't afford to do that if China is going to come in behind them and fill that void or that vacuum of where the Americans used to be. So in order to become a global superpower, you have to confine China to its corner of the world. It's a pretty big corner, because a lot of people don't understand how much activity China has put into Africa in the last 20 to 30 years, in the number of farms that are actually in Africa. But China being, they don't produce their own oil, but Russia does. China will refine anybody's oil. They've got lots of refinement capability. But the issue is, if we want to trap China, or if the Americans want to trap China in their corner of the world, they have to somehow confine their energy. That's the issue. If you look at what the petrodollar is, and this is where it comes into play for Alberta, why do you think Trump went after Venezuela? Why do you think they're very, very happy to get Alberta's oil? And a lot of people don't realize that America is one of the largest oil producers in the entire world as well, with massive reserves. So if you can take North America into Venezuela and basically control all of that oil, and make all of those countries sell oil with the US dollar, why do you need the Middle East? And if anything, this conflict in Iran right now has proven to all the GCC countries that America can't actually protect them. And that was the part of the deal. It was like, look, we'll sell our Gulf oil. If you protect us, we'll sell it in American dollars only. That's where the petrodollar comes from. Well, it turns out America can't protect Saudi Arabia. They can't protect all of the GCC oil producers anymore. And Iran just proved that. And so it's like, well, why do we need to sell it in American dollars now? Well, We need to smash it to bits. The Americans are saying, maybe we need to smash this thing to bits, because if you supply oil to China, that's going to be a problem for us, because we can't contain China if Iran and all the Middle Eastern countries are giving oil to China. We can't contain them. Well, 65%, or roughly 65% of Russia's oil refinement capacity has been now destroyed by NATO and Ukraine. So what does this force the Russians to do? The Russians are now sending all their oil to China to refine it and then get it back. There's lineups in Russia for petro now. So where does this all work in for Alberta? Alberta is the number one oil producer in North America. They have all the reserves. Alberta should be aligned with America. All the pipelines go north and south with, line 1 that goes to Ontario. But Doug Ford doesn't seem to be managing his team very well. He's not managing the Americans. He's not managing Alberta. He's aligning with Carney. And all he's doing is upsetting Alberta. So Alberta is very, very well positioned economically, and they still already sell their crude oil in American dollars. They're part of the petrodollar system. Get rid of BC, get rid of Ontario, go north and south with your product, your uranium, all your other natural resources that you have there. And Saskatchewan will follow suit shortly after with the potash and uranium and stuff like that. So go north and south, forget east and west. Be part of Fortress North America. Be part of a defense pact with America. I'm not really a big fan of joining, becoming Canada 51 or America, whatever. Yeah, Canada 51. I don't think Alberta should join the Americans. I think they should stay independent. And I think that they should do a military alliance with the Americans to protect Arctic sovereignty for the U.S. as well as Alberta itself. And so I think Alberta is very, very, very well positioned to be basically the Middle East, and I mean in a literal sense, be the Middle East of North America. Why would they stick around with Mr. Burns, who makes everything in every decision that Danielle Smith wants to make in terms of infrastructure and wealth so difficult? Why? Why has this guy got his throat on Alberta? What is in it for Alberta? Nostalgia? That's it. That's all I can come up with. Nostalgia and some shared history. Well, cut the cord. Get away from Ottawa. Start doing business north and south with the Americans. Now, as an Ontario person, that's going to be hell. That is going to be absolute hell for us in Ontario in the future if that does happen. Now, a lot of people are against Alberta independence, and I think the only way that it's going to happen is if the Americans get pissed off enough and they make it happen. I mean, this is what the Americans have been doing since the 50s. They started doing it in Iran in the 50s, where they put people into government, into positions of power that they want. This is what they have mastered. Why would we think that Alberta is somehow going to be immune from foreign interference by...
Especially when it has the third largest proven oil reserve on the planet.
Yeah.
You're just talking about all the things worldwide geopolitically. It's something that I probably realized early on is I'm like, if Alberta stands a chance at independence, the world will have its say on that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely they will. Now, I do think if you talk to Susan Kokinda, she'll probably have a lot to say about the City of London, which she should. She seems to be an expert on that whole dynamic. But right now, the conflict in Canada, between Canada and U.S., is not Canada-U.S. It's not Carney against Trump. It's Trump against London. Because I think the chief of staff to the King of England is Mark Carney's brother. So you've got...
Say that again?
Yeah, the chief of staff to the King of England, or Buckingham, is Mark Carney's brother, is affiliated with the royal family. I'm pretty sure he's the chief of the staff.
We're
I could be wrong on it, but I'm pretty sure he is, and I'm glad you're fact-checking that, but I know he's fully integrated. His brother's integrated into Buckingham. Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of England, right? After he was the governor of the Canadian Bank of Canada. So he's integrated into the whole British system. And this is what Susan's going to talk about, I hope.
Well, now I'm curious. I'm grokking this as we go because I'm like, I'd never heard that. I'm like, How is it that I sit here and stare at
I
all
actually
things
thought I got that from Promethean. Is where I thought I heard that. Could be wrong.
in a
I'm willing
broad
to be
sense? Mark Carney's older brother Shaun works in the British royal household as chief operating officer for the household of the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine,
Okay.
at Kensington Palace.
All right. So I was close, but not.
Whoa. You're like, were you a bullseye? No,
No,
but you're
I'm on
in
the board.
I would say you're in the
Yeah.
ring surrounding the bullseye. This is pretty darn close.
Yeah.
And he just goes on to say he is not a direct personal aid or employee of the King Charles. Instead, his role involves operational management of the Wales household, which is part of the overall royal household
So
structure.
the future king of England.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you're doing your, when you put the thing up on the board, right, and people make connections,
Oh yeah.
some of them you're like, I don't know, that's okay. You spend a cup of coffee working wherever, you're like, it's like saying I was close to the NHL playing a cup of coffee over here, and no, he spent 13 years playing for the Hartford Whalers, and his brother now is part of the whatever. You're like, oh, that's a little different. Like Mark Carney, obviously Bank of England, Bank of Canada, a whole bunch of other things in there. His older brother being a part of the Prince's household management. Yeah, that's pretty tight connection.
Yeah. And you'll see, and I learned this from Susan Kokinda on watching Promethean Action, that the current Governor General of Canada was tied to, I believe, the UN, at the Hague, I think, War Crimes Tribunal. She was involved in that. She's a lawyer, and he's got another key person involved at the UN level who's now on staff with him as well. But she's American. So when you talk to Susan, definitely bring up the people that Mark Carney has surrounded himself with.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we got to do this beforehand. I'm glad that you brought it up because I'm like, well, I'm actually on my way there. So
Yeah. So I guess really when you look at it, this has been a battle between the US government, the American system, and the City of London, the monarch system, that whole financial system, everything. Canada plays a big piece in that. Canada's representative right next door to Donald Trump. His major adversary financially right now is England. It's not Canada. Canada is just kind of the guy who's executing the plan on behalf of, I mean, why did the king come here after Carney was installed? Right? How often does the King of England actually come to Canada? Or even the Queen when she was alive? She didn't visit very often either. Right? The relationships are there. The network analysis is probably pretty easy to figure out who's who and who's talking to who and who's working on behalf of what agenda. But your viewers are going to look at it and say, what the hell does that have to do with my everyday? How does that impact me going to the grocery store? How does that impact me paying my mortgage? It doesn't today, but it's good to know the strategic thing. And this is why I'm saying, like, I'm telling you, that fly is like a hummingbird when it comes near me. It's pretty juicy, pretty juicy. But no, I think it would take a couple of shots with one of those electric fly
I agree.
swatter.
It's a juicy it's a juicy fly.
So I call it three circles, and I got this from somebody in Veterans for Freedom. I think probably Drew McGilvery, and if I'm just saying this because if I don't, I'll be getting texts that I didn't credited him. But there's three circles, right? There's the circle of interest. This is like Mark Carney never calls Tom Marazzo, but I'm interested in what he does. But there's the circle of influence, the things that I can sort of have an impact on if I want or if I can. And then there's the circle of control. This is everything in my life that I control. Most people right now are surfing the internet, and it's all about, the circle of interest. They spend 80% of their time there. And everything I outline, my theory or the other people's theory about Fortress North America, that's the circle of interest. Great, I know about it. The only reason I kind of know about that or I monitor that is because I want to see how this war is going to develop, and I want to know what gas prices are what's going to happen. I want to know, how do I bring that down to my level? That's the only reason. But I don't spend 80% of my time in that circle. Everything is about what can I influence and what can I control. But people that are following the conspiracy spend 80% of their time in the wrong circle. Me, I focus on preparedness. I focus on doing a good job. You know, right now, my biggest focus is being a good father and being a good husband. That's my number one focus right now. It doesn't mean I get to not work anymore or not think about those other things. But I've reevaluated my life over the last, 5 years almost since the Convoy. And everything else has not really contributed to me being a good husband or a father. It's been a distraction. I mean, I'm still being sued for $290 million. After the Convoy, it took me 33 months to get a job because nobody would touch me. I was so radioactive. I was living off my Army pension and I had $600 a month.
I was going to say, not that you probably could have come to Alberta, but you ever get stuck in a situation of 33 months, which I highly doubt will ever happen again, you make a phone call, because I'm sure I could have found you work out in Alberta.
The issue for me was my kids are in Ontario.
Yeah, fair enough.
I can't abandon my children to the likes of, Doug Ford and Mark Carney. I just can't do it. And so I have to stay in Ontario as long as my kids are here.
Yeah, that's completely understand.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think I got sent a Shaun Ryan and a Tucker Carlson podcast from, I don't know, was that a week ago,
Yeah,
2 weeks ago, regardless. And I listened to it. Mm-hmm. And what Shaun Ryan is saying basically is, he went somewhere, he doesn't want to talk about it. But internally, I have definitely visited something similar to that. Some people call it hell. Just a very uncomfortable place. Pushes you further or closer towards a relationship with God, I would say. And then he's talking about how he thought he knew it all and fame got to him and, like on and on. And that, he thought in his mind Donald Trump was the answer to everything. And I'm paraphrasing this all, folks. But regardless, it was a very interesting chat. And I'd went through parts of his story at different times. And the reason I bring this up is when I was listening to it, I'm like, oh man, why do I go through it sooner than Shaun Ryan? You'd think Shaun Ryan, with all of his background, maybe it's because he's like a big name or something, right? And it just takes longer. But what you just said with, after 5 years, I went, is this making me a better husband or a better father? Nope. I don't know where along the path, but I had a moment where I just went, the only thing that really matters is God, your family, and, Jordan Peterson would say, clean up your own room. And then maybe building community. If you can get maybe a couple of the first things on the roll and you start to just clean up your life, maybe then you could meet your neighbor and have a conversation and maybe do a little bit more than that. And then maybe a little bit more than that. And when you tie back in your example of we live in the influence, the road trip has been very healthy, Tom. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's taken me out of that realm and into what I can control. Because most days it's kids screaming at each other. It's dealing with little issues on the vehicle or the camper. It's, what are we making for supper tonight? And realizing we don't have any food, and we're eating peanut, peanut butter and honey sandwiches have become a favorite, and a surprisingly, you think you get sick of that. Somehow you don't.
Yeah.
And it's been very much in the different realms of not in the influence, but I think it was Carla Treadway and me talking about the content diet. What are you ingesting from online media?
Yeah.
And is it healthy for you? Probably not. What can you control? Maybe we should go back to controlling that, because if we build a society or a group of communities that are family orientated, have God at the top of that pyramid or bottom of that pyramid, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah.
We won't get fooled by COVID again.
No. I started seeing a counselor recently, just for various different things, right? But I made this comment about one of my kids, and I said, I think my kid is starving for attention. And, I take personal responsibility for that. And she said, I'm going to correct you a little bit. She's not necessarily starving for connection. I just
Attention.
butchered attention. She's starving for connection. And that was kind of like a backhand across the face with a white glove. You know, it was a real challenge. And not an insult in any way. She's a really great therapist, but it was really a bit of a gut punch, honestly, to hear that. Because as her father, that's my responsibility. And so I talked to my daughter about this stuff, you know, and my focus has been, because I only got married 2 months ago. It was 2 months ago yesterday. And
Congrats, by the way.
thank you. And, you know, I married an amazing woman, and I know all newlyweds say that, but I really, really did. I married somebody who challenges me on all this whole notoriety stuff, and, you know, my perspective is in my views on the world and everything. She challenges me very hard. She challenged me in a way to say, what is really important to you? Because you're always talking about circle of influence, circle of control, but you're talking all the time about your circle of interest. So she checks me on that stuff all the time too. And so I've now looked at social media. Like I had, I think, over 97,000 people on my X account. I shut it down about a month and a half ago. It's like, what is the point? The world does not need Tom Marazzo in it, but my kids do. My wife needs me. So that's my focus. I've been called every name in the book. I've been called grifter. I've been called all these things. I've been called spy, CIA guy, FBI, CSIS, whatever. All sorts of names, the whole spectrum, whatever. But my goal right now is why I went to the Convoy. I went to the Convoy for my kids. That's why I went to the Convoy. And now, almost 5 years later, I'm coming back and saying, I haven't done a great job in the last 5 years of being the best father to my kids. But I do like to write. I write a lot. I write on my Substack, and I always try, my goal is always to give something of value to the reader. I'm not just, you know, my musings. I want you to walk away from it. I mean, a comment to me, the greatest comment anyone could ever give me about my writing is, well said. That's it. That's all I want to hear. But, you know, going forward, I don't see a very great immediate future, and I'm talking the next 3 to 5 years. I don't see a lot of greatness for the world. I work in AI. I interact with it every day. We use it at work. I use it all the time. I have my concerns about where we're going with the AI. I do the best I can not to be afraid of it, but I wrote my planning book, my emergency planning book, because in my view, I refuse to do things out of fear. I want to do things out of confidence. And so writing, you know, the People's Emergency Plan for me was give people confidence, give you a toolbox, and go and do that kind of stuff. I don't advertise it anymore because it wasn't working.
Where can people find it?
Amazon. It's just on Amazon. In fact, I got a copy of it here, and I feel terrible even shilling for the book, but it's, you know, right here, the People's Emergency Plan.
You shouldn't feel terrible for shilling. If I had a book, I'd shill it all the time.
Well, I got 4 of
That's
them.
what I mean, Tom. I think very highly of you, and if I could help you sell more books, I would gladly do so. And so, like, if people haven't picked it up, right? One of the last conversations we had was when you're preparing, not every area is the same. Now I got the fly flying around my head.
Yeah.
Not every area is the same. That's what I liked about it. It's a decentralized planning book on how you can prep your area.
Yeah.
So for the people that are listening, the People's Emergency Plan, you can find it. Look it up. If you haven't got a copy, you should. But I don't want to pull us off what you're talking about with, like, you know, what really matters. It's like the amount of time I spent on emergency planning and, like, you know, bunker or having whatever. I'm like, at some point I went, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, I have spent a lot of time thinking about this when I could be, you know, around my kids, my wife, or like learning about something that would actually, I'm not saying that you should put 0% into what happens if disaster falls. But on the flip side, it's like, if you spend every waking minute thinking that the nuke is going off.
Yeah.
That's not a healthy way to live either.
It's not. And so the reason I did bring it up is because the important piece is the confidence piece.
They're making fun of me now, Tom.
Yeah,
They're
I
just
know.
like,
They're just Bert. We're going to call that guy Bert. I don't know. It's just a good name, Bert. But I think the reason I wrote it in David Redman also, he wrote the foreword and he actually helped me. He did a review on the book. He's been a huge help for this book, right? Because of his expertise, and he's just such a phenomenal, he's just a pure gentleman. He's not going to go on a show without wearing a tie. I love David. But he always talks about doing this from a perspective of confidence. And I believe that truly. And planning doesn't have to be, I'm so overwhelmed and so terrified that I have to do something, because that's not really a plan. That's just fear kicking in and forcing you to do something that is very unnatural to you. But again, focusing on being a father and a husband doesn't mean that I don't have to work anymore.
I agree. Right? I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But when we started the book club 2018, I joked because the five of us didn't really want to talk about it. But the idea was to become better husbands, better fathers. And I thought that was corny. And still at times I think it's corny, because it means just by focusing on that, it's not like you have to, by focusing on that, you actually have to work. You actually have to do all the crappy things you don't want to do, because that is what being a good husband and father entails.
Yeah.
It's the responsibility of, I was explaining, me and Shay, my oldest, me and him had to get the sewage off the camper last night before I left to come here. And he's like, why don't we got to do this? Why can't Mila do this? And I'm like, some things, buddy, you just got to do. And if you're going to be the man of the house as you get older, right, you're going to have a family of your own, you're going to take care of the shitter. And that's just life.
Yeah.
And you can either make it this big, horrendous, it smells bad, I never want to do this again, I'm going to lay on the ground and complain, or you can just get on with life, because it's just something that makes your mom happy that's done. And she'll thank you for it when you walk back in. And just, let's clean the shitter. I mean, we're not even cleaning it. We're just holding the hose and making sure it gets emptied, right? Like, it's not even that big of a deal. And yet, that's what becoming a better husband and better father is. It's not that you have to let go of everything else. No, you actually have a whole bunch of responsibilities. One of the things about reading the Bible, Jesus is real. Okay, I better start reading the Bible. I thought, actually, I don't know what I thought, but I assumed probably that, everything's done. Life's grand. And you start reading the pages, like, oh, crap. I got to start cleaning that up in my life, and I better start working on this. The level of responsibility is there, and it probably only goes up. But the weight is, like, manageable. It's like, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Being a better husband and a better father. I thought that's a really good point. It's not that you just get to focus on that. And no, by focusing on that, you realize how important going to work every day is. And putting money on the table and taking some of the stress off your wife, and being there for your kids when they have bad days, or they got questions about the world, or there's things going on that you got to discipline. It's all the things.
Yeah. And, being a provider is not just the financial provider or the structural, the house provider. It's the emotional provider. It's the safety and the security provider. It's I tell my kids, both of my kids know, I've told them this their whole lives, that my job is not to be their friend right now. My job is to get them ready for adulthood. When they have a family of their own, kids of their own, then we'll be friends. But right now, my job is to get them ready, to prepare them for life. And I treat my kids extremely fair, but we're not equals. I call the shots. And when it comes to safety or security, my kids know there's no debate, there's no compromise. Everything else is subject to debate and questioning and wanting to know why. Everything except for safety. And so, being a provider, and there's a great saying that Joanna found in a book, my wife, and there's this saying, this is why I went into the therapy. I started doing this. There's this saying that if you don't learn to deal with your childhood demons, those demons will raise your children. And so I was like, I think I got a couple of those. Maybe I should should deal with. And I got a couple from the convoy that I didn't really realize that I had.
Demons from the convoy.
Yeah. Like I had an enormous amount of. I did go through a pretty good depression after the convoy, because of what happened on the last 2 days. You know how the government and all the police, what they did to everybody that was there, the beatings, especially the veterans. And I know, like, and I say especially the veterans because obviously I'm attached to the veterans, but the beatings that the veterans took, you know, wearing their berets and their medals. These are Afghanistan veterans that all got the crap beat out of them and arrested and brutalized by police officers. For what? For what? Nobody can answer that question. And, you know, that would justify wounded veterans deserving that level of violence where they were unarmed and peaceful. And talking to the police and telling the police we're surrendering, we're not resisting, and they were beaten anyway. And so, you know, for months I carried around this, like, what did I miss? What did I miss? What did I do that contributed to that? And I went to the commission and I learned that really the decision to do what they did was made before the convoy even arrived. They had every intention from day one of going in there and brutalizing. They were just looking for a reason to brutalize Canadians. And that's what they did. And so for a long time, I carried an enormous amount of, you know, this empty feeling of what did I miss? Like I, you know, was very naive in a lot of things that I said and I did in the conversations I had, but I knew at the time I was being naive. That's kind of a weird phenomenon, to do something that you know is naive and do it anyway, even though you know that it's very naive and it's probably never going to happen. But this was really, I was grasping at lifelines that nobody was throwing. I was trying to make things happen. And I'm talking really about the federal Conservatives, you know, which is why this current cohort will never get my vote, because as far as I'm concerned, to this day, none of them have shown even an ounce of courage. As far as, you know, recognizing what the convoy did and recognizing, I mean, there's a couple out there that I like, but some of them weren't even in office during the convoy, right? I can't count Andrew Lawton in that. He was at the convoy, but he wasn't elected
Yeah.
at the time. But there are some out there that I know did support it, but again, the matrix is preventing them from publicly speaking about it. Well, Dean Ellison is a real exception for me. He is the Conservative MP that got the meeting for James Topp with the government, which, by the way, not a single Liberal, NDP, Green Party, or even Communist showed up to. Nobody showed up to that other than the federal Conservatives. So they get a pass on that one. But I really do struggle with some of the things that went on and the aftermath of it. I do struggle with the fallout of some of the characters that were there, the Pat Kings and the BJ Dictors of that, the Bridget Beltons, just the non-stop vitriol hate that they keep expressing towards Chris and Tamara in particular, way more than for me. But you know, they're ordinary Canadians that just tried to be the change in the world that they wanted to see happen. And people that stood shoulder to shoulder with them in Ottawa are the ones now that are their fiercest critic, the ones who are most vigorously attacking them. So there's a lot of that really disappoints me, which is why I don't belong to any groups anymore. And I won't belong to any groups. I won't join any more groups. And I've already told Derek I won't run for office again. I'm just not going to do it. My focus is to protect my family, to be a good father and a good husband. That's my focus. And I have other things that I have to do in order to meet that commitment to my family, but it won't be from becoming a politician. And I look at everything that was done to the public during the COVID era. The conditions were set by Ottawa and by Queen's Park and all the premiers. They set the conditions for what happened to everybody. But everything that was done to people was executed by the local level, by the local governments, the local bylaw, the local police, the local doctors. They were the ones who were the executioners on behalf of the higher ups in Queen's Park or Ottawa. And so I think that I do believe in community. I absolutely do. Like in terms of preparedness, lone wolves will never survive. Build your pack, because there's a reason that packs travel as a pack, because they're the strongest. And lone wolves get picked off. But again, being a responsible provider is taking planning serious. And we all buy insurance. We have car insurance, house insurance, life insurance. We all get skills. We get educated. We all do things to make sure that we're all in a good position. Emergency planning is just one more thing, because in my view, we are really, I don't know the timeline, but we are on the verge of one of the greatest financial upsets of our lifetime. And I think it'll be bigger than the Great Depression. And it's all because of AI. AI is going to be such a phenomenal disruption to the consumption cycle in terms of employment. I really do think, and I see signs of it everywhere. I'm seeing.
So what do you think when you say the consumption cycle, people are going to be out of jobs, so they're going to consume less?
Well, yeah, because if you think about this in one way, companies are all about efficiency. Capitalism is about efficiency. Cut cost to increase your margins, to make more profit. AI is going to replace employees. Those employees are going to have a really hard time buying the products that is made by the company that just laid them off. Like, imagine a car company laying off all of its workers and having robots do all the work. Where are the employees in the residuals and in the different supply chain? Where are all those people going to make enough money in order to buy that product, to buy that car, that truck? Where like, there's a disruption. We've never seen this before, to the point where it's efficient for a company to replace employees to cut labor costs. We've never seen it on a scale that we're about to see it. And I would argue that obviously the software industry is the first major disruption, and white collar jobs are in real jeopardy. The blue collar jobs right now is where it's going to be at. I think they got at least another decade, maybe 20 years of safety. So if I was telling my kids going into college right now, I'd be like, go be a carpenter, go be a plumber, go be an electrician. Don't go into software. And I used to teach software at a college. Do not go into software anymore. Okay, so there's one more piece to this. Universal basic income. The government is going to have to respond. They're going to have to respond.
If you go down the road of the car manufacturer, so how do you get people to afford the product that they just got laid off building?
Yeah.
The answer becomes universal basic income.
Yes.
Because then you give to a bunch of people who no longer have work, means to live on. Mm-hmm. You never own anything because now the government will buy it for you. You pay your taxes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So then the next question becomes, if I quote hate speech from the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, and it's put on social media, is somebody going to social credit score my UBI? Is somebody going to start downgrading the amount of money we're seeing signs with this with the credit card companies.
It's funny. Okay. Earlier on, you said focusing on the positives. Right now, you're painting this dystopian future.
Right.
And what I've learned about dystopian anything, COVID, right? Yeah. If you would have went out and bought your weight and then some in gold, mm-hmm. you'd be a very wealthy person right now.
Yeah.
Now, I would argue the stock market, mm-hmm. the CNRL shares are the ones that come to mind. Forget what they got down to. Was it $7? And then by the end of the year it was 90. Mm-hmm. Forgive me on the exact numbers. You get the point. Yeah. There's huge opportunity in disruption. Mm-hmm. So in this disruption, we're talking about, you're going to lose your job. But on the flip side, you could say, but if you're a builder and you go into carpentry, mm-hmm. nobody's replacing you for a long time. Because every blue collar person I've ran into talks about how they're swamped with work.
Yeah.
On the flip side of all the negative, what are some of the positives that might come, Tom, that you look at and you go, well, if we have that big a disruption, in the case of gold and silver, you could see it, because I've heard Armstrong and different people talk about, could gold double again? Things like that. Possibly. But they have more conservative numbers. Either way, they're talking about going up. You get into a disruption like that or a money printing cycle again like that, it has no choice but to go up. So you go precious metals, and here's my shameless plug, right? Because Silver Gold Bull does sponsor not only the podcast, but they're one of the title sponsors of Bow Valley Credit Union of the Cornerstone Forum, right? It's like, well, maybe you should be putting just a little bit of money into that. Just a little bit. Reach out. Because if we're going into this dark place, there will be things that do exceedingly well in that time.
Yeah. That is, on an economic perspective, that is a lot less clear to me right now. Because I don't think that it's the only major upset. In the 20s, we had the Great Depression.
Sure.
And I promise I'm going to try to make this positive. But in the 20s, we were just dealing, we had, when did we get off the gold standard in the U.S.? Canada got off in the 30s. The Americans didn't get off until
1970. No, it was 71 or 72, wasn't it?
Yeah, 71.
Regardless.
It was under Nixon in 71. I was 2. So I remember it.
Yeah,
Like
vividly, yes.
Vividly, right?
We're off the gold standard.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, change my diaper.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we've had these economic bubbles throughout history, and it had nothing to do with AI. But we're coming up on some really kind of weird tech bubbles right now. We're coming up on major financial bubbles. There's a convergence of these different bubbles. Sure. At the same time, we're seeing the emergence of the AI piece. And I'm hoping the positive for me, maybe just my own positive, is the fact that I'm seeing what's going on. I'm kind of in the circle of interest a little bit there. And it's coinciding for me, it's converging for me at a time in my life when I'm focusing on my family. I'm focusing on being a good father and a good husband. And what that means is taking responsibility for being good at those two very critical tasks. But I'm also reevaluating, what is it that I want from my life? Do I want the Ferrari? Do I want the mansion? Or do I want to get closer to, we've been watching, we've watched it twice now, the new version of Little House on the Prairie. Wasn't roses. In picnics. It's a hard life. But I'm more interested in living more old school pre-technology right now, growing my own food, having my own eggs, building my own house. Like I am building a cabin on my land right now. I am more interested in that, in timber framing and learning about farming and getting closer to that, than I am about chasing the next big financial whatever that might be around the corner or opportunity. To me, I'm looking inward on what is Tom Marazzo, what really, really speaks to me, and a really good friend of mine. We've talked about these God moments, these moments of pure happiness. And
pure joy.
Pure joy. And my friend has said to me, when you feel that, stop what you're doing and just say thank you. Just say thank you. And thank and appreciate the moment that you're having. Hold on to it. And that's what I'm starting to pay much more attention to that stuff than I ever did. And I considered myself a very strange sort of sense of humor, but during COVID, I lost my sense of humor. I lost it. And I have had to work really hard to get it back. And to be fun and enjoyable and less serious. And it's the reason I only look like I'm 20 years old, even though I'm 53, is because I never laugh, I never smile, and I don't go in the sun. No, but the reality is, I think the opportunities I hope for people are personal growth, not growing your net worth. That's what I'm hoping, that maybe the opportunity with the UBI, maybe it doesn't go dystopian. Maybe it is okay if you're telling me that maybe I only have to work 2 days a week instead of 5. Maybe I can use the 3 and not waste them on stupid stuff. Maybe I can enrich my soul with the extra time that I have. And I'm hoping. I mean, that's kind of the journey that I'm on with my family, is doing that. Like I'm weaning off the social media stuff, realizing that that's a false god for me. And just, again, focusing on my family and, thanking when I have those moments of clarity in my life, really. So, yeah. And, selling the books is how I get nice windows on my cabin instead of garbage one. So, no, I like really, I'm hoping that people get into a personal journey type of thing and really, really evaluate what's important to them. That's what I'm hoping people do.
Yeah, the personal evaluation.
Well, you're doing it right now because you're in close quarters with your family traveling across North America. So you're doing it. You're on a rehearsal, on a prepper rehearsal, which is a pretty good thing. Because you're going to come away from this after you've been at it for 46 days. You're going to really get an appreciation for preparedness.
Well, I so you go back to, I'm sure there's people that are tired of talking about COVID, but it's funny because in my life, that's the one time where everything just fell apart, right? Like you're just like, what is going on? And society just fell apart in front of your eyes. It didn't matter where you went, it just fell apart. Mm-hmm. And, and then I went to the Mennonite community in Manitoba. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there and I was talking, and I was talking to all these different Mennonites, and it was a girl. It was Carly. I think it was Carly. Mm-hmm. She was a podcast guest. Anyways, she didn't even know about Alberta independence. And she was a smart lady.
Yeah.
I've referenced her quite a bit. But she wasn't the only Mennonite. Then started talking about COVID and how, we just did our thing. We weren't worried about it. We weren't worried about protests, and we were just, and you're like, huh. So when it comes to like the personal journey of like, cleaning up some of the things in your life and being a better husband and a better father and the responsibilities that come with that, I don't mean about getting filthy, stinking rich. Mm-hmm. I look at it and I go, doesn't mean we have to be poor. And I don't, and I know that's not what you mean. Yeah. And I know we're kind of, like I bring up the financial thing in precious metals, and you're pointing towards the inner side of it and lots of the different things. I think they're almost the same side of the same coin almost, right? Mm-hmm. You go and you work on some of the things, and then you're going to realize, like if I just pay attention to a couple things, I could probably catch them before they happen. Yeah. And, like chances are if we're going to a dark place, there's going to be certain things that perform well. Mm-hmm. And I hate to sound like such a salesman. It's just like, that probably just makes sense. And then if you do those things and you prepare for it beforehand, it's like having a generator when the power goes out. You have the confidence to just be like, we're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And in a dark time, if you prepare for it, and that can be food preparation, it can be water, it can be lots of different things. I just think, and maybe I'm overly confident on Bert flying around my head again. Likes the mic too. Yeah. Maybe I'm overly confident on precious metals. I just look at their test of time and I go, I just feel very confident that if the world goes sideways, they're going to perform well. And if they perform well, I'm going to be okay on multiple different levels of having confidence, like a generator would, or having the inner strength just to say no. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go to that place.
Yeah. I got asked, I was interviewed by Druthers years ago. The day I announced that I was running as an MPP in Ontario. It was Worldwide Rally 7 in Toronto, and they asked me, my definition of freedom.
Okay.
And I was kind of like stumped for a second. And then it just kind of smacked me in the face. And it was, to me, freedom is the absence of fear. It's that basic for me, for Tom Marazzo. That definition works. It's the absence of fear. I'm free when I don't have to worry about what I say. I'm free when I don't have to worry where my food's going to come from. I'm free when I don't have to worry. I don't have to be afraid of the police or the government or my neighbors or predators. The absence of fear makes me free.
Makes you free.
And so when I take that to a homesteading, because really, people interchange homesteading with preparedness. They're very similar, but they come from a different perspective. One is a way of life, one is a motivation. And I think what I would like to do is get more into homesteading, because that puts more distance between me and depending on the system,
The structures that have been built.
Yeah, and if I can put distance between me and the dependence on those structures, then I have no fear of losing them, and that gives me more freedom, and that gives me even more time, maybe. And it doesn't mean, hey, well, you got to work 40 hours a week and then you got to go tend to your pigs and your cows and your chickens and all that kind of stuff. It's like freedom or free time, I would say, is really in the eye of the beholder, what your free time is. But, there's this idea, I think Robert Kiyosaki in one of his books says something like, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And, I love that idea. And I would really, really love to get into homesteading, which is eventually what my goal is, to get on my land. And homesteading for me is like, okay, that's the ultimate in prepping. But I enjoy my life. I like what I'm doing. I've got the freedom to do it. I feel very secure, and I have time to spend with my family and my wife. One of my favorite YouTube channels is My Self-Reliance, Shaun James. He's up Huntsville area. 2 million subscribers on his show. So what he's doing, a lot of people seem to like. And there's other guys out there that are doing it. There's a Gridlessness out in BC, Cabin River Outdoors in BC. There's guys all over the place doing homesteading channels, very, very successful. That seems to be really resonating with a lot of people. And it certainly does with me. I'm up at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning watching this guy, up in the Sudbury area, watching what he's doing every, what is it, Wild Homestead or some weird show like that. But this is what I like to do. That's what I enjoy. And that's where I'm kind of trying to point my life, is to focus on my family. And the other thing that we don't talk about enough, and I write about this a lot, is values. Values are something that we should be all focusing on. And I think David Redman would agree, values, morals, ethics, principles. These are the foundations of a successful society. And, when we talked about, being apologetic about talking about immigration, the reality is all first world, the most wealthy, highly educated, most developed countries in the world are of Christian influence. Canada, US, England, Ireland, all of them. All the first world nations of the world are foundationally Christian. And even if you're an atheist, you still benefit from the ethic of the Christians. And what's interesting to me is that none of the other religious countries, none of the other Muslim countries, the Hindu countries, are as successful in looking after their people as the Christians are. Which is interesting to me is that they come here for the milk and honey, but yet in their own countries, they can't stay there and build what we have. It's easier to transform Canada into a third world country than it is to take your third world country and raise it to a Canadian standard or an American standard. It's a shortcut. You're jumping ahead in line, right? And the reason that we have what we have in North America or in all the first world countries is because it was done from the morals, ethics, values, and principles that were derived from Christianity. And that's a fact. Look at Russia. Russia's a Christian country. It's very successful for Eastern European country. Poland, 90% Catholic. These are highly, highly successful countries, and they all took their work ethic, their values from Christianity. We can't look at the other non-Christian countries and say, hey, you're up to that standard. That's why they're all coming here, because they're going, holy shit, you made something unbelievable. I want that. So I'm going to jump ahead in line. And we're letting them. We're letting them. And we're not raising the level of living standard for Canadians because we're letting them in. We're actually lowering our standards. Because look at affordability. Look at
Or
the
you could let them
inflation.
in and just hold the standard, and when they don't live up to it, you just send them back.
Yeah.
And then it becomes known around the world that when you go to Canada, you gotta represent Canadian values, and if you don't,
Yeah.
you go home.
And this is why, like, for Carney to say stupid things like Muslim values or Canadian values is stupid. It's ignorant. It's insulting, and it shows that he's detached from reality. I don't have an issue with Muslims in other countries, right? And I have friends that are Muslims, and I care about them deeply, but they're not, Muslim fundamentalists or extremists any more than we have, KKK members. I don't hang out with KKK members who are Christian, right? Everybody's got extremism. Everybody has it. But I would say by and large, the most successful countries in the world are descendants of Christian morals, Christian ethics, values, and principles. The Declaration of Independence, Christians, and, however other theories you want to get into. But if you look at the U.S. Constitution, Christians, that's the reality.
I'm just making sure the cameras
Yeah.
don't die.
Yeah. Sorry, we've been going on a little long.
Well, no, it's been good. I appreciate you having me here. Ontario, it's it's been really beautiful. Like, I mean, you have a beautiful province.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many questions for Ontario folks. It's probably the wrong guy to ask them all, because at the same token, you've been at the forefront of so many things. I got to find a way to talk to some everyday Ontario and just find out what makes them tick. Maybe it's the same problems we have in different places. But, I come from Alberta, where it's a raucous group, like, we may not agree with each other, but there's a lot of people pulling on the rope. And I always chuckle because, what do people see? They see the infighting. And half the time I just got to remind people that's just what we do here.
Yeah.
And, to the outside world, they see that and they go, why can't you, like, I go back to some of the things you said right off the top. I go, this is not what we do.
Yeah.
We disagree at the best of times. And, like, we're waiting for maybe the Ronald Reagan of sorts to come out of the woodworks and everybody pull in behind them and away we go. And until then, we argue and we discuss and we boot out Jason Kenney and we discuss booting out Daniel Smith, even though I don't think that's going to happen, but it gets discussed regardless because that's what we do. We discuss all the things. And, I keep coming east thinking maybe I'm going to find some of that, like, sentiment. And I do with people such as yourself. I shouldn't say that I don't. It's just by and large, I have not seen it lessens every province I go east. And I'm curious what I find all the way in Newfoundland. Not that Newfoundland folks aren't great people. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of curious what they think of. Because in Alberta, I've been trying to put my label on what it is that's so different. And Karen Katowski had said it probably the best, in that the places with more freedom get more freedom, and the places without freedom don't get more freedom faster. That's not the way this works. So Alberta looks like this bizarro place where everybody infights. But that's just what happens there. And people get worked up in the emotions on it. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, people are suing people and other people are suing other people. And I think they're on Team Good. They're still trying to pull they all want independence. They just don't think this person's going the right way. And, and on and on and on the stories go.
Well, you look at a province like Alberta, all the most contestable areas, even in elections, it's always the university towns. All across North America, the most difficult areas to get consensus on things are usually where there's a university. And it's because, again, students are a captive audience away from the influence of their families. And that's where the indoctrination seems to be the focus in North America, is in the campuses instead of in the kitchens or the living rooms of people's houses. The dinner table should be where you're passing on your morals, your ethics, your values to your families and your kids. And you should be talking about politics. You should be talking about money. You should be talking about faith and family. You know, and men, God forbid, they figure out what the hell a woman means by the word intimacy. You know, like they really should look this up and say, hey, intimacy is not sex, guys. Intimacy is a different thing altogether. And I know you're completely clueless on this, but figure out your relationship will be a hell of a lot better.
A man can spend his entire life figuring that out.
Yeah. And you know what? I was lucky to, at about, 48, 49 years old, I finally figured out what it was. And now I'm married, right? Don't try to figure it out after the fact. It's not going to work. You've already broken it by then. And the worst part is about intimacy. We don't know what it is, and we never learn it from our dads because our dads never learned it from their dads. And so when you figure that out, I think that's when men finally figure out the key to a happy marriage is intimacy for a woman is in her mind. It's not in between the sheets. So, yeah, I think we got to talk about things that we were not talking about before as families. We should have these tougher conversations with our kids at the dinner table and not let the post-secondary institutions get a hold of your kids. Because it usually only takes 1 or 2 semesters where I have a lot of friends that have kids in university. They don't recognize their kid the first semester back at Christmas time. They're like, who the hell is this kid? Who is this liberal freak telling me I'm a colonizer? And I sent them to do software. And they're now telling me that, I'm a colonizer, or in that, we used to own slaves and stuff. It's like, well, I hate to tell you, Christians are the ones who put an end to the slavery. They were the first group of people that said, hey, we're not, this is unacceptable to us as a people. This does not abide by our morality. We're going to put an end to it. But there's only one group in the world right now who's being persecuted for slavery. It's the very people that have tried to put an end to it more than anyone else. It's Christians.
We could go on and on.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having me in your house. Me and Jack have been working on a little thing for the audience. So if you want a couple of bonus questions from Tom, quick hitters, I'm going to be over on Substack. But Tom, I appreciate you having me in your house and all the things. But it's great to see you again and to be in your home province and, sitting on your back deck with a, Bert the Fly and a little bit of construction, a plane flying overhead, but a heck of a view.
Yeah.
I mean, a heck of a view, but I've thought this of all of Ontario. I didn't realize how beautiful of a province it was, when you go through it in the dead of winter. And my 3 years I spent in Ontario was in the dead of winter playing hockey. You never actually get to see how beautiful it can be.
Yeah.
So it's been really cool to be here, and obviously I'm not leaving anytime soon. There's a bit more time here, folks. But either way, thanks for having me in and doing this.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming to the house. I really do appreciate it. I like talking to you, and we always have great conversations. And you know what? I got to say, you're always prepared. I've been on some shows where the first thing out of people's mouths is, hey, for the audience who doesn't know you, tell them something about yourself. And my response is always, well, if they don't know who I am by now, why would they watch this show?
Well, in fairness, that's my go-to with most new guests because I like the origin story. Yeah, I believe in allowing a guest to explain who they are. But I feel like by now, if you're new to the audience, go back and look through Tom Marazzo on here.
I'm in there once or twice, yeah.
Well, I mean, you even go back on the Western Standard days when I had my brief stint with the Western Standard. Yeah. I did a series of 4, maybe more than that, 4 to 7 shows, I want to say. Mm-hmm. And you were on one of those, right? Yeah. Like, it goes a long time back. I think very highly of a whole group of people, which you're included, that were a part of the Freedom Convoy. And I think they're just exhibit great values for Canadians and of that group of people. And people could say whatever they want to say about any of us. I don't really care. I got to witness it, so it's pretty hard to erase that memory,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So either way, thanks again for having me in.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun.